My name is Chad Kelly, and I am 51 years old. For 3 decades, I've spent my life in the heavy hum of manufacturing plants outside Cleveland, Ohio, keeping the machines running that build this country. I've never been a man for pews or hymn books. To me, religion always felt like a prop for folks who couldn't stand on their own 2 feet, and I figured as long as I worked hard and treated people right, I didn't need a middleman to talk to the creator. I believed in a higher power. Sure, you can't look at the way a complex engine fits together and think it happened by accident, but I kept my distance from the church. I live in a small house that feels too big since my wife, Sarah, passed 3 years ago. My grown kids are scattered across the Midwest, busy with their own lives. Usually, I'd spend my evenings in the garage, tinkering with an old truck and listening to the radio, feeling a mounting dread about the world. The anger in the streets, the talk of shortages, the way neighbors don't even look each other in the eye anymore. Today is February 25th, 2026, and I'm sitting at my kitchen table, my hands still shaking as I look at a world that has no idea how thin the ice really is. It was just 4 days ago, Saturday, February 21st, 2026, when my world ended and began all over again. I was at the plant performing a standard seal replacement on a massive 50-ton hydraulic press. It's a job I could do blindfolded. I followed every safety check, locked out the power, and bled the lines. But the machine hit a pocket of pressurized fluid that shouldn't have been there. When I loosened the final bolt, the steel housing didn't just leak, it exploded. A piece of shrapnel the size of a brick caught me square in the chest, and the force threw me 20 feet against a concrete pillar. I remember the sensation of my breath leaving me, not as a gasp, but as a slow, quiet exit. The gray, oil-stained ceiling of the factory began to dissolve, and for a moment I was aware of the grit on the floor and the smell of cooling metal, and then I was aware of nothing at all. I wasn't in the plant anymore. I wasn't anywhere I could describe with a compass or a clock. I was rising, like heat off a summer pavement, leaving behind the heavy, broken shell of the man I had been. I looked down and saw the chaos. My friend Mike screaming for a medic, the yellow safety tape flapping in the draft of the vents, but it felt like watching a movie of someone else's life. The pain was gone. The constant ache in my lower back, the stiffness in my hands from years of gripping wrenches, the heavy weight of missing Sarah every single morning, it all just fell away. I felt light, lighter than the air itself. Then the light appeared. It wasn't like a flashlight or the sun. It was a living thing, a golden, pulsing warmth that seemed to breathe. I felt myself drawn toward it, and I wasn't afraid. For a man who spent his life skeptical of anything he couldn't measure with a caliper, I found myself surrendering to it with a peace that surpassed every bit of logic I owned. As I moved deeper into that light, the world of steel and grease felt like a distant, foggy dream. Then, he was there. Jesus stood before me, and everything I thought I knew about him turned out to be a shadow of the truth. He didn't look like the figures on the stained glass windows I'd seen as a kid. He was a man of the earth, strong and weathered, with skin like polished cedar and eyes that seemed to contain every star in the sky. He was wearing a simple robe, but he carried a presence that made the very air vibrate with power and kindness. When he looked at me, I felt a wave of love so thick it felt physical. It was like standing in front of a furnace on a winter day, but the heat didn't burn. It healed. He knew me. He didn't just know my name, he knew the way I felt when Sarah died. He knew the times I'd worked double shifts so my kids could have shoes for school. He knew the times I'd been angry and the times I'd been lonely. He saw it all, and in his eyes I saw that I was loved anyway. "Chad," he said. His voice wasn't a sound in my ears, it was a resonance in my chest. It was the sound of a father's hand on a shoulder, the sound of a job well done. "You have spent your life keeping the wheels of the world turning," he told me. "You have fixed what was broken and maintained the order of things. You didn't do it for praise, but because you knew it was right." I tried to speak, but my heart was too full. I felt like a dry sponge being dipped into a bucket of water. I realized then that my work in the shop, the quiet way I'd tried to live my life, it wasn't just a way to pay the bills. It was a service. He looked at me with a smile that made me feel like I had finally come home after a very long, very exhausting shift. But then his face turned serious. The warmth in his eyes remained, but a weight settled over us. "I have brought you here to show you what is coming, Chad. The machines of man are about to fail, and my people must know how to stand when the world goes dark. Suddenly, we weren't in the light anymore. We were standing on a high, grassy ridge, and below us was the entire map of the United States. It was nighttime, and the country was a carpet of twinkling lights. I could see the great cities like glowing embers and the long lines of the interstates like strings of pearls. It was beautiful, but as I watched, I saw a shadow beginning to creep across the edges of the map. "Look closely at the end of next month," Chad, Jesus said. He showed me the date in the air, glowing with a soft white light, March 29th, 2026. At first, everything seemed normal. I saw a family in a small town in Indiana sitting in their living room. The TV was on, the kids were on their tablets, and the microwave was humming in the kitchen. Then I saw the sun. It looked like it was boiling. A massive arc of white-hot fire leaped off its surface and raced toward the earth. It wasn't a slow thing. It hit the upper atmosphere with a silent, invisible force. "On March 29th, the heavens will speak," Jesus said. I watched as the lights below us didn't just flicker, they died. In that house in Indiana, the TV screen went black. The tablets in the children's hands became nothing more than pieces of dark glass. The microwave went silent mid-cycle. But it wasn't just the power going out. It was as if the very spirit of the machines had been sucked away. I saw the father reach for his phone, but it wouldn't even turn on. I saw him try the light switch over and over, his face twisted in confusion. "The first darkness is a hush," Jesus told me. "It is a 3-day Sabbath that I am imposing on a world that has forgotten how to be still." I watched as the darkness spread from the Midwest to the coasts. In the hospitals, I saw doctors and nurses frozen in shock as their monitors went dark. I saw emergency generators try to kick on, only for the delicate parts inside them to sizzle and fail because the energy from the sun had reached deep into the metal itself. For 72 hours, the world will be forced to look at the stars instead of their screens. I saw a vision of a crowded city street. It was Saturday night, March 29th. The streetlights were bright, the neon signs were buzzing, and the cars were humming along. Then the pulse hit. I saw a modern electric car just stop in the middle of a busy intersection. The driver tried to turn the key, but there was no response. The dashboard was dead. Behind him, dozens of other cars began to coast to a stop, their engines silenced as if by an invisible hand. People climbed out of their vehicles, standing in the middle of the road, looking up at a sky that was suddenly filled with colors they had never seen. Shimmering curtains of green and red dancing over cities that should have been too bright to see them. "They will think it is a show," Jesus whispered. "They will marvel at the lights in the sky, not realizing that the world they built is being unplugged." I saw a mother in a high-rise apartment trying to find a candle. She hadn't bought any in years. She was rummaging through a junk drawer, her hands shaking, while her children cried in the corner because they were afraid of the dark. I saw her find a single, half-melted birthday candle and light it with a shaking hand. That tiny flame was the only thing standing between her and a void that felt physical. "Tell them to store the water, Chad," Jesus commanded. I saw the great pumps that bring water to the cities. When the power died, the pressure began to drop. As I saw people turn on their faucets, only for a weak trickle to come out and then nothing but a hiss of air. For 3 days, the taps will be dry. Those who have not filled their vessels will find that their thirst is the first thing to test their spirit. I saw a man in a suburban kitchen looking at a dry sink, realizing he didn't have a single bottle of water in the house. He had a fridge full of soda and beer, but no water. "This first event is a mercy," Jesus said, as I was looking down at the darkened land. "It is a warning shot. The power will return after 3 days, and the world will try to go back to its old ways. They will call it a freak weather event. They will blame the sun and go back to their pride. But my people must use those 3 days to fall on their knees. They must use the silence to hear my voice again." I saw a vision of a church in a rural valley. When the lights went out on March 29th, the people didn't panic, and they gathered in the sanctuary by the light of kerosene lamps. I saw an old woman standing at the pulpit, her face glowing with a peace that the darkness couldn't touch. She started to sing a hymn, and slowly the others joined in. Their voices rose up through the roof, and I saw a golden thread of light rising from that church, connecting straight to the heart of the heavens. They are ready, Jesus said. They know that the light of the world doesn't come from a wire. He showed me the importance of the month leading up to this. The days between today, February 2025, and the end of March are the days of the gathering. I saw people in their garages, like I used to be, but instead of tinkering with trucks, they were checking their supplies. I saw a man putting a hand pump on his well. I saw a woman buying extra blankets and heavy coats. These are the physical signs of an inward change, Jesus explained. He showed me the spiritual state of the country. I saw millions of people walking around with gray veils over their eyes. They were obsessed with their disagreements, with their politics, with the things they owned. But as the date of March 29th approached, I saw some of those veils being torn away. I saw a man who had been bitter for years suddenly pick up the phone to forgive his brother. I saw a woman throw away a bottle of pills she had been using to numb her heart. This is the work of my Spirit in these final weeks, Jesus told me. If they do not clean their hearts now, the darkness will be a prison for them. But if they repent, the darkness will be a sanctuary. I saw a vision of a grocery store on the morning of March 30th. The power was still out. The shelves were being stripped bare by people who were driven by a blind animal fear. I saw people pushing each other, shouting, grabbing whatever they could. It was a scene of pure desperation. But then I saw a young man standing in the middle of the aisle. He had a bag of apples in his hand, and he saw an elderly woman who had nothing. He didn't think twice. He handed her the bag and smiled. In that moment, he shone like a star. This is what I'm looking for, Jesus said. Those who will be my hands in the dark. But they cannot give what they do not have. They must spend this time right now filling their own spirits with my word. He showed me the date, March 29th, 2026, one last time. It was a threshold. Once the world crosses it, nothing will ever be the same. The 3 days of silence will pass, and the lights will flicker back on April 1st, but the world will be living on borrowed time. The vision didn't end with the return of the lights in April. As we stood on that ridge, I watched the calendar of the world flip forward through the months of April and May. I saw the people below scrambling to patch things up. I saw work crews, men just like me, pulling double shifts in the rain and the wind, trying to replace scorched wires and blown fuses. On the surface, it looked like the country was recovering. The evening news was full of experts talking about solar cycles and grid hardening. They used big words to calm the public, telling everyone that the March event was a one-off, a freak of nature that wouldn't happen again in our lifetime. But Jesus looked down at them with a sorrow that made the grass beneath our feet seem to wilt. They are fixing the shell, but the core is rotting, he said. They think that because the humming has returned to their walls, they are safe. They have gone back to their screens, back to their arguments, and back to their pride. They have used the month of May to forget the lessons of the March silence. He moved my gaze toward a hidden place, far across the ocean and deep under the ground. I saw rooms filled with the soft glow of monitors and men with cold, focused eyes. They weren't looking at the sun or the weather. They were looking at the intricate map of the American spirit, specifically the systems that manage the flow of life through the country. I saw an invisible hand reaching out, not with a hammer, but with a silent, poisonous intent. The second darkness is not a warning from the heavens, Chad, Jesus told me. It is the harvest of man's own hatred for his brother. Look at the day they celebrate their flags and their history. He showed me the date, June 14th, 2026. As the sun began to set on that summer day, I saw a synchronized strike that made the March event look like a flickering candle. It wasn't a pulse from the sun this time. It was a surgical tearing of the country's heart. In substations from New England down to the Gulf Coast, I saw the massive transformers, the great steel beasts I'd spent my life respecting, begin to fail from the inside out. I saw the cooling oil inside them begin to churn and boil. I saw the porcelain bushings crack under a pressure they weren't built to handle. This is the shattering of mirrors, Jesus said. Because they refused to see their own reflection in the first darkness, I am allowing the mirrors to be broken. At exactly midnight, as June 14th turned into the next day, The eastern half of the nation vanished into a void. But this time, it wasn't just the power that stopped. I saw the very machines that move water, fuel, and food go into a state of permanent seizure. I saw a vision of a massive shipping port. Thousands of containers were stacked high, filled with everything the people needed to survive. But the cranes wouldn't move. The gates wouldn't open. The trucks that were supposed to carry those goods sat idle in the lots because the systems that told them where to go had been turned into a tangled mess of nonsense. I saw a driver sitting in his cab, pounding on his steering wheel because his GPS was showing him a map of a city that didn't exist. The hunger will begin in the cities within 48 hours, Jesus warned, because they have built a world where nothing is stored and everything is moved by a thread. The snapping of the thread will bring them to their knees. I saw a vision of a supermarket in a suburb of Philadelphia. On June 16th, the doors were smashed in. I saw people fighting over bags of rice as if they were gold. I saw a man who looked like he'd never had a speck of dirt on his suit in his life, weeping over a broken jar of peanut butter on a filthy floor. When the belly is empty, the mask of civility falls away, Jesus said. Those who did not prepare their spirits in the quiet of March will find that their fear is a more cruel master than their hunger. He showed me a vision of the great betrayal. I saw the leaders of the land standing in front of cameras powered by private generators. Their faces were grim. They didn't tell the people to pray. Instead, they told them that the darkness was caused by their neighbors, by people who held different beliefs, by those who had warned of these very events. They began to offer a solution. I saw a digital mark being offered, a way to track who had food and who didn't, a way to bring order out of the chaos. They will offer a light that is not mine, Jesus whispered. They will say, sign this oath, take this digital identity, and we will give you bread and water. Many will take it out of a desperate need to stop the gnawing in their stomachs, but in doing so, they will be handing over the keys to their souls. But then, Jesus moved my vision to a small farm in the Appalachian Hills. It was July of 2026, and the world outside was in agony. But on this farm, there was a peace that felt like a thick blanket. I saw a group of 30 people gathered in a circle in a barn. They had spent April and May preparing. They had dug a well that worked with a hand lever. They had planted gardens with seeds that had been passed down through generations. They had bags of grain stacked to the rafters. I watched as a woman walked to the center of the group with a small basket of bread. There were only 5 loaves, and there were 30 hungry people. She didn't look worried. She looked up at the rafters of the barn and gave thanks in a voice that was steady and full of faith. As she began to break the bread and pass it out, I saw something that my mechanic's mind struggled to grasp. The basket never got empty. She kept reaching in, and there was always another piece of warm, fresh bread. This is the economy of my kingdom, Jesus told me. To the world, this is a time of scarcity. To my people, it will be a time of multiplication. But they must have the faith to break the bread they have. If they try to hoard it out of fear, it will turn to dust in their hands. If they share it in my name, it will never run out. I saw a vision of the healing. I saw a young girl in that same community who had fallen ill with a fever that would have normally required a hospital and modern medicine. But the hospitals were dark and the medicine was gone. I saw the elders of that small group lay their hands on her head. They didn't use fancy words. They just spoke to the Creator as if he were standing right there in the room, which he was. I saw the fever break instantly. I saw her skin go from a sickly yellow to a healthy pink in the span of a single breath. When the systems of man fail, my power will be the only medicine they need, Jesus said. But they must learn the sound of my voice now, while the world is still noisy, so they can hear me when the silence becomes absolute. I saw a vision of the golden threads. Across the darkened map of the East, I saw thousands of tiny pinpricks of light. They weren't electric lights. They were people. I saw a man in a row house in Baltimore. He had a small stash of food, but he also had a heart that was open. He heard a knock on his door in the middle of a hot July night. It was a neighbor he'd never spoken to, a woman with a crying baby. He didn't turn her away. He brought her in, gave her a cup of water, and started to tell her about the peace he had found in the middle of the storm. As he spoke, a golden thread grew from his chest and connected to a home 3 blocks away where another believer was praying. These threads are the new grid, Jesus told me. The world's wires are broken, but my spirit is weaving a web that the enemy cannot touch. Through these threads, my children will know where to go, who is in need, and how to find each other. The vision shifted again, and the heat of summer began to fade into the cool air of September. The country was a fractured version of its former self. The West was still trying to maintain a police state, with soldiers on every corner and drones in the air, trying to keep the power flowing to the elite. The East was a wilderness of darkened cities and small, independent communities of faith. Jesus turned his gaze toward the end of the year. The tension in the air was like a spring wound, so tight it was about to snap. The second darkness had thinned the herd, he said. It had separated those who trusted in the world from those who trusted in the Word. But the final test was still to come. Look at the end of October, Chad, Jesus said. The air on the mountain grew cold, and I felt a shiver that didn't come from the wind. He showed me the date, October 31st, 2026. I saw the people of the world trying to pretend things were getting better. They were planning celebrations, trying to find a way to distract themselves from the hunger and the loss. But beneath the surface, the very foundation of the earth was groaning. The sun was preparing its final message, and the hearts of men were preparing their final rebellion. The third darkness will not be a warning or a judgment, Jesus said. It will be the transition. It will be the moment when the old world is finally put to rest so that the new one can be born. I saw a vision of the great steel mills and factories. They were silent, rusted monuments to a civilization that thought it could live without its maker. I saw the massive gears that I had spent my life greasing and aligning. They were locked tight, frozen by a lack of care and a lack of power. It broke my heart to see the machines die, but then Jesus touched my shoulder. Do not weep for the steel, Chad. Weep for the souls who think the steel is their God. The machines were only ever a temporary gift. Now they must learn to walk with me again, just as they did in the garden. The air on that mountain ridge grew thin and cold, vibrating with a frequency that made my very bones hum. It was a different kind of cold than what I'd felt in the Ohio winters. This was a cold that felt like the presence of a vast, ancient truth. Jesus turned his gaze toward the final horizon of that year, and I felt the weight of what was coming. The earlier visions of March and June had been like ripples in a pond, but what I saw next was the tidal wave. Look at the day the world calls for its own shadows to dance, Chad, Jesus said. He pointed to the sky where the date October 31st, 2026, burned in a deep, blood-red light. The third darkness will be the final collision, he explained. It is the moment where the pride of man and the groaning of the creation meet in a final shattering. It will be a total eclipse of the world they have built. Everything that was not shaken in March or broken in June will be swept away on this day. I watched as the sun, which had already sent its warning in March, seemed to reach a boiling point. A flare larger than anything recorded in human history erupted from its surface, a whip of white fire stretching across the blackness of space to strike the earth. But at that exact moment, I saw the human side of the tragedy. Deep beneath the soil of the country, in hidden bunkers and rooms where men thought they were masters of the world, a final sequence was triggered. It was a kill switch. Every power plant that was still humming, every substation that had been patched together with duct tape and hope, and every major transformer left in the nation was destroyed or disabled within the first hour. From the peaks of the mountains to the flat plains of the coast, there was no electricity anywhere. The silence was absolute. I saw the great interstates, I-80, I-70, I-95, become steel graveyards. Thousands of modern cars, their engines fried by the double strike of the solar flare and the digital kill switch, simply died where they sat. Because it was the end of October, the cold was already beginning to bite. I saw a mother in a stalled SUV in a mountain pass trying to wrap her children in the floor mats of the car because the heater had failed and the temperature was dropping toward freezing. The death toll from this third darkness will be over 30 million people, Jesus said. His voice wasn't harsh. It was the voice of a father watching a house fire he had warned his children about for years. Most will not die from the strike itself, but from the complete failure of everything they trust. There will be no trucks moving, no water flowing from any tap, and no heat for the winter. The pumps that bring water to the thirsty cities will be dead forever. I saw a vision of Chicago, the wind howling off the lake in a bitter, killing gale. I saw thousands of people trapped in high-rise apartments. Without the electric pumps, the toilets wouldn't flush. Without the gas furnaces, which needed electric blowers to run, the buildings became giant ice boxes. I saw people trying to start fires on their hardwood floors just to stay alive, leading to massive blazes that turned blocks of the city into charcoal. There were no fire departments to respond because the trucks wouldn't start and the hydrants were dry. But then Jesus touched my eyes again. Look at the remnant, Chad. Look at those who have the oil in their lamps. I saw a small community in the Ozarks. It was the same group I'd seen before, but now I saw the spiritual mechanics of their survival. There was a hedge of golden light around the entire town. I saw an old man standing at the edge of a frozen field, holding a physical Bible and praying with a steady, quiet breath. I saw a spiritual barrier that seemed to deflect the freezing wind, creating a pocket of calm within their borders. Inside the town, life moved with a rhythmic, old-world grace. I saw men forging tools by the light of a coal fire. I saw a communal kitchen where women were baking bread in brick ovens. They were singing hymns, and the sound of their voices seemed to provide a physical warmth that shielded them from the despair outside. They are not just surviving, Jesus said. They are thriving because they have returned to the order of the garden. They depend on the soil I gave them and the spirit I breathed into them. They do not fear the winter wind because they have already survived the March fire and the June storm. He showed me a vision of the healing. I saw a young man in that town who had been badly hurt by a falling tree. There were no hospitals left, no X-ray machines. I watched as the elders of the church gathered around him. They didn't look panicked. They laid hands on his leg and prayed with a ferocity I had never seen. I watched as the bone knit together under the skin and the bruising vanished. When the false lights of man's medicine fail, Jesus told me, the true light of the healer will return to my people. But they must have the faith to ask. They must have spent the year 2026 learning the sound of my voice. I saw a vision of the scripture scrolls. Because the digital Bibles were gone and many books had been lost in the fires, I saw children in these communities memorizing entire books of the Bible. I saw a 10-year-old girl stand by a fireplace and recite the entire Gospel of John from heart. As she spoke, the words seemed to hang in the air like golden embers, providing more comfort than the fire itself. This is the restoration, Jesus said. The darkness is the womb of the new world. He then gave me the detailed instructions for the timeline of preparations, emphasizing that the window is closing even as I speak to you today. Tell them the physical preparations must be matched by the purging of the heart, he said. By the time they reach the window of March, they must have already begun their stores. If there is hidden bitterness, if there is unforgiveness, if there is an idol of silver or gold, they must cast it out. If they do not, that bitterness will become a rot that destroys them during the June and October events. No amount of preparation can save a man who refuses to forgive. He showed me the timeline again, clear and unmistakable, so I could write it down for you. February 25th, 2026. Today, the final warning, the month of decision. The weeks leading up to March 29th are for deep spiritual purging and repentance. This is the last chance to seal the home spiritually before the first strike. March 29th, 2026, the first darkness, the solar warning. 3 days of blackout, the loss of digital idols. June 14th, 2026, the second darkness, the strike on the infrastructure. The eastern grid falls, the beginning of the hunger. October 31st, 2026, the third darkness, the total collapse, the kill switch, and the great flare. Chad, Jesus said, looking at me with a gaze that felt like it was stitching my soul back together. The world will tell you that you are a madman. They will point to the lights coming back on in April as proof that you were wrong. They will laugh at you in May, but you must remain steadfast. My sheep will hear my voice in your words. I saw a final vision. the reconstruction. I saw the year 2028. The sky was bluer than I'd ever seen it, scrubbed clean of the smog of the old world. The massive cities were quiet, many of them abandoned and reclaimed by the grass, but the countryside was dotted with villages that looked like something out of a storybook. I saw people working together in the fields with horses. I saw schools where the first and only lesson was the love of God. I saw a society where there was no more loneliness, no more evening news to worry about, because people were too busy loving their neighbors and walking with their Creator. The darkness is not the end of the story, Jesus said. His voice echoed as the vision began to pull away. It is the beginning of the greatest spiritual awakening in human history. Those who prepare and endure will see my glory in ways that people living in comfortable times never could. I felt that pulling sensation again, stronger this time, dragging me back toward the weight of my physical body. Lord, I said, what if they don't believe me? Jesus smiled with infinite love and a sadness that could move mountains. Chad, you're not responsible for convincing anyone. You're only responsible for delivering the message faithfully. I'll make sure it reaches those who are meant to hear it. But remember this, you are never alone. I am with you always. And those who trust in me will not be put to shame, even in the darkest times. The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air in a hospital bed, machines beeping frantically around me. My friend Mike was there, looking like he'd aged 20 years in a single afternoon. A nurse was checking my vitals with an expression of pure amazement. Chad, you're awake, Mike said, tears streaming down his face. You've been out for a long time. The doctors said there was massive damage. They didn't think you'd come back. The doctor who rushed in couldn't explain what he was seeing. Mr. Kelly, he said, studying my chart with confusion. Your heart stopped for a long time. By every medical standard known to man, you should not be functioning. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years and I've never seen anything like this. But I wasn't the same person who had been working on that hydraulic press on February 21st. In my body, yes, though I healed impossibly fast over the following days. But in my soul, I was completely transformed because I had seen the future and had been given a mission that would consume the rest of my life. I've spent every day since then delivering this message. I am sitting here on February 25th, 2026, and I am telling you that the window is closing. The first darkness is just over a month away. If you're reading this story right now, today, February 25th, 2026, you have felt the stirring in your own spirit. You know the world is fragile. You know the peace in the world is a thin veneer. Here's what you need to do. If you haven't stored your food, start today. Do not wait for the lights to fail on March 29th. If you have bitterness in your heart, let it go. Build your community. Find the other threads of light in your neighborhood. The choice is yours. You can dismiss this as the ramblings of a mechanic who took a bad hit. You can explain away the medical impossibilities of my recovery as a lucky break. You can ignore the specific details and the exact dates I have given you. Or you can consider the possibility that the God who loves you is trying to prepare you for what's ahead. That he's giving you advanced warning, not to terrify you, but to save you. That he's calling you to be part of a remnant that will not just survive the coming storms, but will serve others through them and emerge stronger on the other side. My name is Chad Kelly. I died and met Jesus Christ face to face. He sent me back with a warning and a timeline. Between now and then, millions will die if they don't prepare, but millions more will find Jesus, build authentic community, and become part of the greatest revival in human history. The choice is yours, and time is running out. What will you choose? We deeply thank you for staying with us until the very end. If you're still here, it means this testimony has touched something profound within your heart. Now, we invite you to take a step that seems simple, yet can change everything. Write your city or country in the comments so we can lift your nation in prayer. Subscribe and activate the bell to receive our daily revelations, and share this video with at least 3 people you love, because even one single share can bring a lost soul back into God's embrace.